With our Building Websites in Flash CS3 video series, I don't want to bore you with a lot of detail about the history of websites, the history of the internet, the history of building interactive websites or animations on websites, things like that. I just want to jump in and get started so we can really start making application. We can start building websites in Flash as soon as possible. Hopefully you know what a website is. If not, you probably wouldn't be here. You probably wouldn't be purchasing this video series. So let's jump in and take a look at how we can make a very, very basic website in Flash. And then once we get that basic structure out of the way, we'll talk about how to create some more functional, more interactive websites. For now, we're going to build a very basic website that will take us from one page to another. Now, in this particular video, we're going to create a very basic website that's going to consist of a number of links across the top of the page. And then we're going to create the different pages of our website using different frames on our timeline. So the first thing we want to do is let's create our menu. Now I'm not going to make this really fancy. We'll create fancy websites as we get towards our major project. But for now, we're just going to build some basic graphics so that I can explain the concepts to you without being distracted by all the frills that go along with designing and creating a full website. So we're just going to create some simple things to start off with. So I'm going to create some buttons, and let's just create a menu bar using our rectangle tool. Nothing fancy. I'm going to turn off the strokes. With the stroke color selected, we'll just click on no color down here. And then for fill color, we'll just choose whatever color you want to use for the background for your menu. So let's choose something bold. Let's choose this bright orange color. And I'm just going to draw a rectangle that goes across the top of the stage. I'm going to select that rectangle, and I want to make it the same width as the stage. And the stage is 550 pixels wide, so we're going to change our width down here to 550. Again, make sure that this object is selected first. So we're going to make our width 550, hit enter. And we don't have to worry about the height because it's not going to be the entire height of the stage. It's just going to be up here at the top. So with that rectangle selected, we'll just move it to an XY coordinate of 0, 0, and we'll just type those values in down here on our properties inspector. Okay, so there's our menu bar. Now let's just create some buttons to put on top of our menu bar. And these are going to be simple text buttons. So let's go ahead and rename this layer menu bar. We'll lock that layer, create a new layer called buttons. Okay, so we'll create a few buttons just using the text tool. So with the text tool selected, we'll go down to our properties, make sure that static text is selected. We're going to create a static text field, which is just a text field that does not change. And we're going to choose white for the text fill color. I'm going to turn off bold here. We might turn it back on in a minute. It depends on how it looks. But I'm using Arial with a font size of 20. I'll simply type the word home on the stage. And it changed our fill color. Let's change that back to white with that text field still selected. I've got some things blocking the white here, so I'm going to go to the color wheel, and then I'll just choose white here and click on OK. There we go. Now let's make this a little bit smaller. And I do want to turn that bold back on. So let's do that. Okay. Make sure that anti-alias for readability is selected. And everything else looks good. So we'll just drag that into place. Okay. So we have a button for our home page. We'll copy that, Control C. I'm going to paste it on top of itself and then move it over. So the way we paste it on top of itself in the exact same location where we copied it from is to hit Control Shift V or go to Edit, Paste in Place. If we just hit Control V to paste, it will paste it right in the center of our viewing area, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to hit Delete to undo that, or to get rid of that. And we'll hit Control Shift V, or if you're using a Mac, it will be Command Shift V. And then once it has placed that new text field on top of the first text field, we can use the arrow keys to nudge it over. Now I'm going to hold on to Shift as I hit the arrow keys so that we can move it over in greater increments. But there we go. This is our second button. Let's just say this is going to take us to the About Us page. So we'll type in About Us. Let's copy that, Control C, Control Shift V to paste in place, and then we'll move this new one over, holding on to Shift and hitting the arrow keys. And this one will represent the Contact button. And then we'll copy that one, Control Shift V to paste it on top of itself. We'll move it over. And then this one will be Let's say that we're selling some products. We'll have a products page. Okay, so one thing we can do is we can space these out. Let's put the home button where we want it to be, and we'll put the far right button where we want it to be, which is the products button. So if we want this to span the entire top of our menu bar, we'll just move it all the way over. And then I'm going to select each one of these by holding on to Shift and clicking on each of these text fields. And then I'm going to go to the Align panel. Make sure that to stage is turned off. We don't want to align these to the stage. We just want to align them with each other. And what we want to do is we want to space them out evenly. So we're going to go down here to Space, and we're going to click on Space Evenly Horizontally. So now they're all spaced out. Very good. So that's what our menu looks like. Now what we're going to do is we're going to convert these into actual buttons, each of these text fields. And so let's do that. We'll click on Home. We'll hit F8 to convert it to a symbol. We'll make it into a button symbol. We'll call it Home. Actually, let's call it BTN Home. BTN obviously is for button. And if we put this BTN at the beginning of the name, then when we look at everything in our library, all the buttons will be right next to each other in the library because the library is arranged alphabetically. So if we want all of our buttons to be next to each other in the library, then we'll just give them this prefix of BTN. So it's a button symbol. We've called it BTN Home. We'll click on OK. Now we're not going to do any fancy rollovers or anything like that right now. We'll talk more about buttons later, but for now we just want to turn these into buttons so that we can make them clickable. So we'll click on About Us. We'll hit F8 to convert that to a symbol. We'll make it a button symbol, and we'll call it BTN About. Okay. Click on Contact, F8 to convert that to a symbol. We'll call it BTN Contact. And on your actual website, you would probably want the products over here right next to the home, because naturally the users will read from left to right. And if you're selling products, obviously you want people to buy your products. That's what you want to bring the focus to. So you would probably want your products over here before the About Us and Contact, but we're not going to worry about that for now. We'll just go ahead and make our buttons. Button, Products, click on OK. And now we have our 4 buttons. If we hit Control Enter or Command Return if you're using a Mac to test your movie, then you can now hover over each of these, and you'll notice we have the hand cursor, so we know that our buttons are working properly. Okay, so let's close this. Okay, so we have all of our buttons. Now we need to create our different pages. Now, when we create pages on our basic website, on this very simple website, and we'll do this different later on, but one way we can create a website in Flash is just to create different frames that contain the content for our different pages. So if we put our About Us content, for example, on page 10, then when we click on the About Us button, we'll just tell Flash to take us to frame 10. So that should be pretty easy. So on page 1, we're going to have our home page. So let's create a new page. Let's lock the buttons layer, or a new layer, I'm sorry, not a new page. On this new layer, we're going to call this content. We'll put all our content on this layer. And then we'll click on frame 1 for this layer, and we'll put the content for our home page. So we might have a title. We'll use another static text field, fill color of black, or maybe something that goes along with the orange. A medium to dark blue is a pretty good complement for orange because it contrasts with it really well. So we'll use blue, and this will be our home page. So there's our title. And then we might have an image, something like that, but we'll have some text underneath it. And I'll just put a dummy paragraph here with nothing that makes sense. We'll just put a bunch of text on here. And this will represent the content of our home page. And I'm going to change the color of that text so that we can really make the title stand out. And this is just picky little stuff we don't really have to do for now. But there we go. And let's also left align that. Okay, so here's our basic home page. And this is located on frame 1. So let's lock the actually, we don't need to lock the content layer. Let's create a new layer. And let's create a layer for labels. And then we'll create another layer on top for our actions. Okay, so we can stretch out our timeline here by hovering in between the edit bar and the timeline and clicking and dragging down so we can see all our layers. On our labels layer, what we want to do is we want to click on frame 1, and then with frame 1 selected, we want to come down to our properties and we want to give this frame a label. Well, let's just give it a label of home. So now this particular frame, frame 1, all the content and all the layers for frame 1 is considered part of this home frame. So now we can point to the home frame and it will take us to frame 1. Okay, so let's jump out to frame 10, and in frame 10, let's create our About Us page. Now, if you remember from our Introduction to Flash video series, or if you're already familiar with Flash, then you'll know that if we want to change the content of our page at a certain point, we need to create a new keyframe. So for the content layer in frame 10, we need to create a new keyframe because we no longer want our home page here, we want our About Us page. So in frame 10, and you could do this in frame 5, you could even do it in frame 2 if you wanted to. I like to space it out so that we can read our labels though. So in frame 10, I'm going to hit F6 to add a new keyframe for the content layer. Now you'll notice that everything else has suddenly disappeared. We can't see the menu bar anymore. And that's because right now the menu bar is only available in frame 1. So for our menu bar, I'm just going to jump out to about frame 60 and hit F5 to insert frames. Now for our menu bar and our buttons, we'll do that for our buttons layer as well, F5. For our menu bar and our buttons, these are going to be constant. These are not going to change. So we don't need to put any keyframes here. We just need to insert some frames. Okay, so we jump to frame 10 now, where our home page or where our About page is going to be. We can now see that our menu bar is visible there. So in frame 10, we just want to take this text here, double click on it, and we'll change the title here to About Us. And let's move it over. I'm going to go ahead and left align this so that when we change it again later, we won't have to move it around. So there's our About Us page. And obviously you wouldn't have the same paragraph here, but you would have all of your content for your About Us page, and you could put that here on the content layer in the new keyframe for frame 10. Now we need a new frame label here as well. So we'll jump out to frame 10 for the labels layer, hit F6 to add a new keyframe there, because even when you're working with labels, you need to create a new keyframe every time you want a new label. So we want a new label in frame 10. So we've created a new keyframe there by hitting F6. And then we're going to go down here to our properties, go to the frame label text field, and we'll call this About, and hit enter. And now that we've extended our frames out on the labels layer, you can actually see the name of that first label, the home label. So that's very good. So now we've created our About Us content, our About Us page. Let's make our contact page. We'll jump out to frame 20, hit F6 on the content layer, and then instead of About Us, this will be our contact page. And then we'll jump out to frame 30, and we'll create our products page. So in frame 30, for the content layer, we'll hit F6 to add a new keyframe, and we'll change contact to products, like so. And then we need to create our keyframes for our labels. So we've created it for the About Us page. Let's go to frame 20 for the contact page. So we'll click on frame 20 on the labels layer, hit F6 to add a new keyframe there. And then with that new keyframe selected, we'll go down to our frame label text field in our properties panel and type in contact. And then once again for frame 30, we'll hit F6 again for the labels layer, and we'll label that frame products. Okay, so all of these extra frames we have for the buttons and menu bar layer, we can highlight those and then hit Shift F5 to delete all of those extra frames. Now, since we can't see the label for frame 30, we might just go out to frame 40 for all of our layers and then just hit F5 to insert some extraneous frames out there. Now, we'll never actually play through these frames, but if we add those frames there, we can now see the label for the products layer, and that's very good from a visual standpoint to be able to see that. So here's our website. Now, if we hit Control-Enter to test our website, you'll notice that it's just cycling through all of our pages, because by default, Flash is going to play through the timeline. So what we need to do is we need to put a stop action on frame 1 so that when we start on the home page, it doesn't jump to another page. So I'm going to click on frame 1 of our actions layer, hit F9 to open up our actions, or Option F9 if you're using a Mac, and I'm going to type stop, open and close parentheses, and a semicolon to end our statement there. Now, when we test our movie by hitting Control-Enter or Command-Enter, it stops on our home page and we have our home page content. So in the next video, we'll take a look at how to add code to each of our buttons in order to take us to the different pages of our website. So let's save our file. We'll go to File, Save As, and then I want you to open up your Project Files folder. And inside the Project Files folder, I'm going to save this as simple01.fla. This is going to be our simple website. Simple01.fla, and we'll start with this file in the next video.